Integrating React, Stripe and Django together is surprisingly easy. Let me show you what we'll be building. First of all, you have a form here where you enter certain information. For me it's only email, but you can expand this, so whatever information you want to store will come over here. test2@gmail.com. Then I simply click on the pay button and I get redirected to /payment up in the browser. Now of course this is on my language, on Hungarian language. Then we come over to the test cards that Stripe provides, copy this success card over, paste it over here, give some dummy data, and then after you've inserted your data, you can just click on pay. Stripe will process your payment intent and you will be redirected to the success page. Now if we come onto Stripe and I refresh, I should be able to see the third payment over here appearing. And not only that, but if I refresh the API homepage that I have, I can see that with ID of 3, a new transaction got added over there. So that's what we'll be building. It will be extremely easy and I'll be helping you along the way. Let's get started. So to kick this off easily, one thing that I will be providing you is the code for the front end and the code for the back end. I will assume that you have some knowledge in both of these frameworks, and I will be opening up a new terminal over here, zooming in a little, and creating my virtual environment. Python-m-vn as of virtual environment, and I will be calling mine environment. You see that it gets created over there. Then I will run my virtual environment with ./env/scripts/activate. Then I can say pip install Django. Then I will start my new project with Django admin start project and then your given name. Then I will cd into the Stripe payment folder and then Python manage.py start app, and I will be calling this app API. Since the backend is the first thing that we are building, I will need to also install Django REST framework so that we can set up our APIs. Pip install Django REST framework over here. While we're at the installation of things with pip, I will also install Stripe with pip install Stripe, and also Django course headers, because when connecting the two apps, we'll be needing to handle course errors. Give out the command pip install Django course headers. Once that's done, I'll head on to my settings.py to hook these up. First of all, at the installed apps, paste these three in. This is the first one, the API, which is the app that we've created, then Django REST framework, then we also register the course headers. Now for allowing our other deployment or our other development server to access this API, I paste in the course allowed origins, which is this URL over here, which is basically just the React frontend. Also in the middleware, after the X-frame options or whatever you have to include the course headers middleware. Make sure to include this as well. One last setting we have to set, I will put this below the installed apps, is our Stripe secret key and our Stripe publishable key. Now what you will see in the given code that I provide you is a different one, and I will be regenerating these API keys so you won't be able to use them. Go get your own and I will show you how to get your own. The way you do it is of course by registering to Stripe first of all. If you only want to test this out, then you don't have to give business details. And then over here on the right hand side for developers, there is a publishable key and there is a secret key. Copy these over and you'll be good to go. Now since I want to store some data in our database and validate the data that I get, I will create a new model. In your models.py you have to create, well, whatever you want to call it. I will be calling it payment model. The payment model doesn't have much. All it has is an amount with a models.decimal field, a currency. This will be important because you can actually send through the API what type of currency Stripe wants to process. There is the Stripe payment ID, which will be storing. The created at is a date field that gets automatically added, and then a user email. Of course, feel free to change these up however you want, but then you'll have to change all the things up accordingly as we go through the video. Now, since we are using Django REST framework, I need a serializer to be actually able to convert our data or model-based data into JSON format so that our React application can consume it. For that, I will be creating a serializers.py. And in this serializers.py, we have a very simple payment serializer that needs to be created. First of all, import the serializers from REST framework and your payment model, and then create a class payment serializer that will inherit from the serializers.model serializer. if we have a class meta tag, we could also do it the modal way, but this makes life way easier. Here I just simply define the modal and then the fields that I want to create and to be serialized. After this, let's go to our views. That's where we'll be writing most of our logic. Here, we'll be needing to make a bunch of imports. Don't worry, just follow along. First of all, we have to import Stripe. That's simple, import Stripe, since we've already installed it with pip install Stripe. Then we have to import our settings from the Django config. This is because, remember, we stored our API keys in the settings. Now make sure when you deploy this, you actually switch those to environmental variables so that they are not public, because if they get out to be public, then you'll be having quite a bit of trouble. Then we have some REST framework imports to be made. First of all, the API view, which is the one that every view will be inheriting from. There is the list API view, which is a generic pre-made view, which makes coding very, very easy. And then there is the response, which will be returning whenever we are working with our Django REST framework views. In the meanwhile, also import the status. This will be for throwing errors. And from our local folders, we will be importing the payment and the serializer, the payment serializer. Now we have to set the API key. Remember, our API key is stored in our settings, so we can call the Stripe that we've imported .api key to be equal to the settings.stripe secret key. We've stored our publishable one as well, but actually in the backend we only need the secret one. Now we'll go on to creating our views. First of all, create a class-based view, payment list view. This will be for listing out that model that we had. All of those data will be listed out in this API view. Its query set will be set to the payment.objects.all. And the query set is where you define which data you want actually to be shown. If you want to, you can filter this data. And also put the serializer class, which will be our payment serializer. This is for validating our data that gets passed in. Of course, you can write your own custom validation on top of that as well. The other chunky view that we'll be writing, this will be more of a custom view. It will be the create payment intent view, and it will inherit from the API view. This is different because Django won't take care of the post requests and the get requests for us, but we actually only need the post request here. Post, as we are handling the post request, it will receive self and request as the parameters. These both contain different type of data. The request contains the data that's being sent to this API. Here, from the request, I will get out some data in variables that I like to work with. This will be the amount, the currency, and the email. And pay attention, whatever you write here will need to be set on the front end in exactly the same format. So it has to be user email, currency, and amount. We will be storing these and getting them from the request. Then comes some validation on our side. This is some custom validation. You can write whatever you want in here. Django also validates it on top of this, so there is no need to worry. If not email, then we return that invalid email. Otherwise, if not amount or the amount is less than 0, meaning it's basically an invalid amount, then we return invalid amount. Otherwise, if not currency, meaning the currency haven't been given, then the currency is required, and we return 400 as bad request errors. Another thing you can do, and I include this as a little extra, is you can define a supported currencies over here, and you can make a custom check for them so that if it's not of the supported currencies, so if currency.lower not in supported currencies, then we return an error that it's not supported. That's basically it. Then we actually get to requesting our Stripe API. This will be done in a try except block. So in the try block, to create a Stripe payment, you have to understand how its API works. And the way it works is basically on the backend, you create an intent that someone wants to pay you or you want to pay someone. Once that intent is created, the backend creates an ID to it. That public ID gets passed down to the front end, and in the front end, you basically finish up and wrap up whatever needs to be done, sending the little secret ID to the Stripe API, and then Stripe will validate your request. That's basically how it works. That's why this API is called create payment intent. Now this intent is done by creating the stripe.paymentintent.create. You have to give an amount, and you have to give a currency. There are other parameters to it if you look them up. Also note that the email is not provided in here because that's kind of a custom data that I wanted to include. And make sure that if it's set to USD, unless you set a certain currency, it will be in the smallest amount of currency of that currency available. So for example, for dollars, it will be cents, unless you specifically set it to be USD, I believe, because that's how I got it working. The next thing that you need to do is save the payment data. The payment data will be simple. This is what you will return into the request. The amount will be the amount, currency, Stripe payment ID, which will be the intent's ID field. And then there is the user email. Now we have to serialize this and actually validate the data. For this, we will be storing it in a serializer and we will pass it into the payment serializer as the data. Now for the validation part, if the serializer is valid, meaning we haven't run into any errors, then we can save the serializer as its valid data. We can return a response where the client secret is set to the intent's client secret. This is what the front end actually needs. And then the payment will be the serializer.data. Also, we return an HTTP 201 created status. Otherwise, if it didn't get through, then we return a response with the serializer.errors. Let me just fix this. HTTP 400 bad request. But we also have to handle the except block. So in the except block, the stripe.error.stripeerror, and we refer to it as E as of error. Then we return that certain error with the status 400. That's basically it. We are done with our API. Let me zoom out for you so you can have a look at it better. There we go. So this is our try catch block. This puts some custom validation into it, some custom data handling, and also makes sure that the Stripe intent is being created. We will test this out in a minute, so no worries. But we have to hook this up in our URLs. So for the API, create a urls.py. Here, just the usual Django stuff. We import the path, we import the create payment view and the payment list view. These are all so that we can access those certain URL paths. And on the home page, we will simply list out all the payment and the data from our database. And on the create payment intent, this is the API we'll be accessing. We simply call the create payment intent.sview. Remember, it only handles post requests, so it needs to be sent some data. We are not done yet. We still have to come to the main urls.py, and here it's going to be very, very simple. All you have to do is import the include next to the path, and then path include the api.urls. With this, we should be done, but just so we have the database set up, I will say python manage.py migrate, make migrations first. This will apply our models to the database, and then python manage.py migrate. Now we still have to create a super user, python manage.py create super user, and then create your super user however you want. And then I can run the server. Open up localhost 8000 and you'll see that we don't actually have this over here. I didn't register our model in the admin panel, so you won't be able to add it by hand. Make sure to register it if you want to play around with it. But if I go to /create payment intent, I will be able to send a post request over here. But we are done with our backend. We can now jump onto our front end and then wrap this all up. Now for integrating React, we have to create a new project. So inside the main folder that contains the backend already and the virtual environment, I've opened up the new terminal and I'll say npm create vite at latest. I'll assume that you have worked with React before. I will call this Stripe frontend. It will be React. I will only be using simple JavaScript, cd Stripe frontend and npm install. Now for our React project, I will be installing React Router DOM for routing, and we will also need to install some Django-based packages. For example, npm install React Stripejs and Stripejs. These are some pre-built packages to use with React. They are very handy because they provide certain hooks that Stripe has built us. Now with this I should be able to clear the console and npm run dev to run our development server, but we still need to create our components. So in the Stripe frontend folder, let's clear out our CSS. All of the CSS needs to be cleared out, the index and the app.css as well. And copy whatever you find in the source code over to the index.css. I won't be bothering with this because I think it's pretty straightforward. For now, I will be leaving the main.jsx out of this. This is where you should be creating your routes, by the way, but I will be creating them in the app. So here are some elements we'll be using. The home page will be writing together. So create a new folder in your source. It will be called components. And inside that, create the homepage.jsx component. The implementation that I've just copied over here is very simple. It's basically the React router DOM usage. We create our browser router and router provider, define that at the default route, we should be rendering the homepage, which now is actually created. I will call refc over here. This is a snippet, an extension you can install for Visual Studio Code. And I will start creating some use states. So above what we render, we need a loading state. This is just a simple loading state really to know if we are loading Stripe. This is the currency and the set currency, email, set email. You can pick a setter for this. I decided to delete that. I will up here import navigate. This is so I can redirect the user using navigation. And I will call the const navigate, which is React routers DOM way. This is their hook, basically, where I can use this and navigate the user wherever I want, whenever some certain codes finish. I will also do a hard-coded amount, which you can hard-code for yourself. This is just the amount we'll be paying, and not actually in cents anymore, so I remove that comment. Now I will copy over the HTML. I think it's pretty straightforward, and you'll be able to see that there is a handle pay click over here, a function that we need to create together. So whenever the pay button is clicked, first of all, I set loading to be true, but we have to execute some other logic as well. This is the part where we actually send our request to our API. So to send that request, we need a try catch block and also a finally part to that as well. I will be including the catch and the finally. The finally just sets the loading to be false. The catch handles the error. There is nothing too crazy going on about it. But however, for our response, this is how it's going to look like. We store it in the response. I set the URL over here that I want to access, which is the create payment intent. And then the method is important to be set to post, and the header is content type application/JSON. Keep in mind this is not authenticated and there are no permission handling over here. If you want that, you will be needing to set the authorization header as well and do some Django specific stuff, but that's out of the scope of the video. We have Django REST Framework crash course for you to do so. In the body, I say json.stringify, and the amount will be the hard-coded amount, the currency will be the given currency, and I also set the user email, because these are the three types of data the server has to know in order to create that payment intent. And after we've received back the data from the response, I await it in this data variable, the response.json, and then if the data.clientSecret, meaning if we actually succeeded, then we navigate to the /payment tab and use React routers DOM state manager to be able to store that data.clientSecret. This will be important for us because you have to send this data whenever you're navigating to the payment page and whenever you're loading Stripe. And this is the next component we'll be getting into. So this should be something that we've built so far. I had to fix some errors because I misspelled the homepage name. But other than that, all should be good to go. Now I have to create the route for the /payment. So I will import the payment page and we'll be creating that. And I will recommend this payment page. But while we're at it, we can also just create the success and failure page. By the way, the failure page is just a leftover. We aren't actually using it, but I will copy over its CSS. Make sure to do so from our source code. These are the success and failure pages. And I also need to create the payment page. So payment page.jsx is what we'll be creating. And here we'll be applying some very Stripe specific things. So for example, first of all, I will import the use state and the use effect. I will import the use location and some other stuff from here. The payment form is something we'll be creating as well. The use location is needed so that we get that state that we've saved over here, so we can get the client secret needed. Then we have load Stripe, which will be executing right at the start. Over here, const Stripe, and this will be equal to the load Stripe method. This is provided by Stripe, and here you have to paste your publishable key. So in strings, paste your publishable key. We have to create some use states. The first one is going to be the location with the use location. This is from React Router DOM. And then we have the client secret setup, which is structured out from the location.state. Now this location.state is where we actually stored our client secret before we navigated from the home page to this payment page. And there is an options use state because we'll be needing that to send to Stripe, basically when we set it up. Next, we create a use effect. The use effect will run first of all when the component loads, other than that when the client secret changes. So this use effect will run if the client secret is basically not null. We set the options to be the client secret, and the appearance, which is basically just a Stripe themed appearance. This is optional, but you have to put the client secret here for sure. And then we have to make some HTML magic over here. I return some simple divs, but you see that if the options is not null, then we return something called an elements and the payment form. Now the payment form is something I will be creating on my own. The elements, however, is a use context hook basically provided by Stripe. Here you put in the Stripe, which is the Stripe promise, and the options as the options object. These define some settings at Stripe, and these elements, whatever is wrapped inside these elements, will enable you to access Stripe-based elements, because there are a bunch of built-in elements, and the one we'll be using is the payment element. So since we have this payment form over here, I will also be creating a payment form.jsx. I hope this is understandable so far. If not, make sure to comment down below whatever is not understandable, and I will do my best to help you out. But basically what we have here is navigating to the payment form. I will call refc yet again, and we'll have to make some imports here as well. First of all, I import the use state. This is very React specific. I hope you know how to use React. And then there is the payment element, the use Stripe and use elements. The two use are two hooks, and the payment element is the actual element that gets rendered from the Stripe library that we've installed. Let's start with this one, the HTML that we'll be rendering, which is basically just a form. And the disabled value of this button, this is the payment processing, is whether we have Stripe or we are loading. And you see that there is a function handle submit that we'll need to create. Other than that, this is just a built-in element of Stripe. If I show you what's inside it, you'll be able to see where it refers to. There are a bunch of these elements. Here, I will create some use states. We have Stripe with the use Stripe and elements with the use elements. The elements is important because then we access all the elements that are wrapped inside this elements array over here, or this elements context basically. We have some message and set loading. These are for our components. Nothing crazy about it. And then we have to create this handle submit function. Inside this handle submit function, this receives the event parameter, because this happens on a form submission. So I have to call event.preventDefault. This is to prevent the browser from reloading. I set loading to true, and if not Stripe or not elements, then we simply return. So if Stripe hasn't loaded or the elements that we have wrapped in, basically that elements use context hasn't loaded, then we return. Otherwise, we await the Stripe.confirm payment. This confirm payment receives the elements, basically which elements are containing the data, the card data, and then there is the confirm params, which basically you just put a success URL over here. And this error will be null if no errors occurred, of course. So we are checking if any errors occurred. We set the message to be this error.message. And we set loading to be false after that. But with this, we should basically be good to go, because if we are successful, we redirect to the success page. So let me go over here and this should be good to go. Let me check. We surely must have some errors. Check the console. No errors so far, so let's try this out. test@gmail.com. I will pay the amount. And we get over here, you can see the console is dropping us some messages to the complete your payment. Here you can come to the documentation of Stripe. You'll be able to see a bunch of card numbers. All you have to do is copy one of these, put in the certain data, and yes, of course, all of these represent different type of cards and different type of scenarios, and put in some dummy data for the CVC as well. The other stuff you don't have to fill out, and then just click on pay. The URL changes and we get redirected to the payment successful. Now I can return to home and we get back here. Let's check our database right now. Let's go back to our localhost 8000 and you see that the amount in USD currency got created. There is the Stripe payment ID. Where was it created? Who created it? I mean the user's email. And if we come to Stripe and come to transactions, I should be able to see that this certain ID created a transaction over here. So with this, we've connected the two, React, Django, and or 3 basically Stripe. I hope this was helpful. If it was and you found value in this video, please consider giving us a like, maybe even subscribe. The source code will be down in the description. And other than that, I hope to see you in the next one. Happy coding and God bless.